Tom, I appreciate you joining me. What's your first recollection of the echo that you saw? Or, I'm leading to how'd you get interested in this?
It actually started pretty early. I was a medical student down in Bedford, Indiana, doing a summer elective, and I was with an internist who had been very influenced by Harvey, who was still pretty junior or at least hadn't been at IU all that long.
Right.
And he told me, he said, now when you get up to Indianapolis next year, starting your junior year in medical school, you need to look up this Dr. Feigenbaum and see if you can work with him in some way. At the time I had thought I was going to go into pediatric cardiology.
Really?
And sure enough, I ended up with Harvey as my advisor. He invited me into the lab as a senior medical student to do a research project. I started working with Bill Armstrong. Ned Wayman was still there, was just getting ready to leave for Boston. It was a very exciting time. And one thing led to another, and I decided to do cardiology.
Can you remember the type of equipment you were using? What time frame are we talking now? When you're a senior, or when you?
Well, this would have been let's see, late 70s.
Okay, so
78, 79.
So using sector scanners with phased arrays.
Well, it was interesting in the lab at that time. There were almost two labs. There was the 2D lab,
okay, and
then there was the M-mode lab. And Harvey's lab was really the M-mode lab.
Okay.
Ned was getting involved in the 30-degree sector
scanner, sure.
And a lot of the fellows were interested in that. But my first project was actually an M-mode project as a senior medical student.
It's interesting because you've had a chance to obviously work with Harvey and Ned and Joe and some of the,
Mm-hmm.
but Harvey was a terror at national meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can remember my first presentation because I was fortunate to be with Rich in the early days of 2D Echo. Was Harvey a terror to work with?
Harvey was never a terror to work with. Harvey was very honest. He was blunt sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the reasons we got along so well is I never felt I needed a lot of pats on the back.
Right.
And I felt we had a very good relationship, and we did, and we always did, and you know how I feel about Harvey, I think. But I did spend a lot of time, particularly as a junior faculty member, walking around behind Harvey, patting people on the back and telling them that Harvey didn't really mean that. I did a lot of that.
And I think that's an interesting thing because people that will watch this don't understand what we're talking about, but those of us who have been in the field forever. But the interesting thing about Harvey, he was always interested in intellectual honesty and excellence in the field. So it wasn't a personal thing, but he was very intimidating to a lot of people. And I'm sure you saw it.
Well, I can tell you just the most recent anecdote. I finished the Edler lecture yesterday.
Yeah.
Harvey came up to me, and the first thing he did was tell me what I got wrong. Cindy was standing, my wife Cindy was standing next to me, and she looked at me and she goes, Harvey will never change.
Nothing changes.
And she further said, she goes, and that's why you love him so much.
Yeah.
And it's true, you know, he's just the way he is. And
Yeah.
I think he's just one of the special people, probably had more impact on my career than any other person.
No, I don't think, and probably obviously on the field. So what happened when where was Echo when you go to Duke? I mean, what were those years like for the field?
It was, again, great timing. I went to Duke right after Joe had implemented the digital lab. So there was a lot of activity in really developing. We were trying to be digital. Of course, coming from Indiana, that wasn't very hard for me because Harvey had really started that.
Harvey was a big proponent of that.
He had always been a big proponent and a leader in it. So there was the digital technology that was so exciting. There was a lot of things going on generally at Duke in cardiology. And then, of course, there was the 3D project with Olaf, and that was a very exciting time. We really started getting involved in what became volumetrics and the first real-time 3D. So it was a lot of fun. Joe and Harvey are very different in a lot of ways, but similar in other ways, as you know. And we had a great time and wonderful memories of those years as well.
You've taken over you and Bill have taken over the editorship of Harvey's book. What do you think the impact of Harvey's book has been, and why did you do that?
Well, I did it because Harvey told me to do it.
There you go.
But
Yes, sir.
no, Harvey. The way it started, when Bill was still at Indiana, the one chapter that Harvey didn't really feel comfortable, or at least didn't enjoy writing, was the congenital chapter. Mm-hmm. So I remember in the I guess it would have been the fourth edition, mm-hmm. Harvey asked Bill to write it. Harvey wrote the rest, and then Bill went on to Michigan. So the fifth edition, he asked me to write the congenital mm-hmm. chapter, and I put unbelievable amount of work into that. But it was a labor of love, and so that was the fifth edition. And then at that point, Harvey decided he didn't want to really write the sixth edition, and he went to Bill. It came to Bill and I, and the one condition he had was that it never become a multi-author text. It would be he and I, Bill and I, we would do it. And in that sixth edition, Harvey wrote the introduction and the history chapter, and Bill and I took it from there.
You're obviously interested in education. You're a good teacher and done a great job with that. Where do you see education in ECHO going? Is it going to be textbook based? Is it going to be interactive? I mean, where are we going with education for ECHO?
No, I mean, people. There's still a generation of us that like the feel of having a book in our lap. You know, there's something sure. about the hard copy. But the future clearly is more in interactive kinds of formats and web-based formats. I don't think there's any question. We're now discussing with the publisher. In fact, the publisher would have preferred more of a web-based presence for this seventh edition mm-hmm. that we're just finishing mm-hmm. up. But the book still is what people seem to want to buy. I think it's inevitable, and I think it's a good thing for ECHO, because ECHO lends itself, because of the video component and the real-time component, that will be a good thing. Perhaps even more so with 3D.
What you've both at Indiana and at Duke, and I'm sure at Ohio State, you've had a close interaction with the sonographers. Mm-hmm. And certainly during your presidency of the ASE, mm-hmm. you did the same thing. What do you see the role of the sonographers in the future being?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the one thing that's clear is that it will change. I believe that sonography will evolve. It's interesting when you talk to the sonographers, they're perhaps among the biggest proponents of 3D echo, and they believe that 3D echo, first of all, is inevitable and going to impact the practice of echo substantially. Second of all, it will greatly change their role. They will become less focused on scanning and more focused on processing. Mm-hmm. And I think most of them embrace that. It will be a change for them. I think they also see the day when there will be even greater autonomy for mm-hmm. sonographers. Mm-hmm. I don't know to what degree that will be, but it probably will happen to some degree. And of course, one of the other things that we spent a lot of time on during my presidency was this concept of the advanced practice sonographer, the sonographer who really was a more independent leader among sonographers within larger laboratories, and I think that will probably come as well.
I'm going to come back to something I was going to ask you about the future, because you just gave an excellent Edler lecture about that. But you were the 18th president of the society. What sort of went on? I mean, you look back, mm-hmm. what happened in the field? Mm-hmm. What happened to the ASE during mm-hmm. your presidency? What do you think about?
Well, it's a time. Of course, we're living through I guess the polite word would be a very interesting time.
Very interesting time.
In medicine in general, certainly in echocardiography. It was a great year. I think we've all of us that have done that year have been so affected by it mm-hmm. in a positive way. Mm-hmm. I think that some of the things that we dealt with, certainly one of the things that I'll look back on that came out of the blue and took up a lot of time was the black box warning for contrast echo. And mm-hmm. I was not or had not had much experience dealing with the FDA, but I learned quickly how to, and I think in the end it all worked out okay. One of the things that I'm most pleased with that we accomplished over the year was really moving our staff from sort of the model that we had previously mm-hmm. into truly creating a team of ASE staff and our own team that were devoted and dedicated to ASE in our own building. Mm-hmm. I think that was a very positive step, and we did it in a way that we really didn't lose anybody. And we have a wonderful staff, as you know, and I think that went very well.
You did a great job with that transition, because that could have been a disaster if it was not handled the right way. With
I had a lot of help.
Well, that's what they always say. But you just gave an Edler lecture at our 20th annual meeting back here in Washington, where it all started under Al and Jules. Did and it was about the future. Okay, so you polled some experts and you polled various experts and looked at that. But what do you take away from that? I mean, if I said, tell me, briefly, what's the future going to hold for the field of echo, the performance of echo?
Well, if we can just get away from what everybody worries about reimbursement and for a second and just set that aside, I think that the future is very bright for echocardiography. I think what came across in the survey was that people believe that echo had become so much a part of the practice of medicine in general and cardiology specifically that it's inconceivable to imagine taking care of patients these days without using echocardiography. So I don't worry, and I don't think any of us should worry about the future of the field of echocardiography. I think that the two things that we really need to focus on that will be important to ensure that echo will continue to be fun to be involved in, if you will, are two things. One is we really need to focus on quality. We've become so diffused into the practice. Perhaps we've lost a little bit of control over some of that. So I think that's one of the issues. And the second thing is we need to keep reinventing ourselves. We need to keep one of the major themes that came out of the survey was that people believe that the reason for our success was that we were constantly able to come up with new techniques, new applications, new technology, and that was such an important sustaining factor in the past and probably will be for the future.
Last question I have is you've heard me ask this before, but so you've had an incredible career in the field. You've watched the technology change. You've had leadership. You've had all sorts of stuff. What are some fond memories, or a memory that stands out in your mind about either the technique, the people you've known, the applications?
It's hard to even pin it down to one thing. I think that certainly I will look back, I think, and be able to say that I was a part of echocardiography at a time when it was perhaps at its zenith, most dynamic, and I saw so many great people come along and make major contributions that really impacted on how we take care of patients. I've gotten to know some of the truly outstanding people in all of medicine, and to work with many of them, and certainly learn from them. It's hard to, I guess, if there was one memory that really stands out, and I believe you were a part of it, is when we honored Harvey back in Indianapolis at the time of celebrating his career at kind of a landmark time, and brought back so many of his friends and really surprised him. As you remember, he didn't know it was coming. I worked with Phyllis to create the event, and it was just such a great celebration, not only of Harvey's career, but really of echo in general. And I think that was probably one of the highlights.
That's dynamite. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank
Thanks
you
for all you've done.
Thank you.